Good morning. I want to share something with you that I picked up from James Montgomery Boyce in his book, Come to the Waters. And it pertains to Acts chapter 1, where in chapter 1, verse 11, Jesus said a few things to them, and then the angels showed up and they said, "Men of Galilee, why are you standing here staring into heaven? Jesus has been taken from you into heaven, but someday he will return from heaven in the same way you saw him go." So they hung out with Jesus. He was very human to them, and he was gracious and loving, and he is all those things. But when he's coming back to evaluate. He's coming back, and we must give account. And I think that they were aware of that. And so, as Boyce says, it was this gentle, loving, gracious, but sovereign, holy, and majestic Jesus who would come back. And we'd stand before him, and Jesus is going to say, "Brothers, how have you done?" It's a great question, isn't it? I ponder it often. And I think I know my shortcomings better than anybody else. And gives you reason to pause, give pause. But I want to share the story that James Montgomery Boyce shares. In the summer of '86, he was in England at this big convention. I've never heard of it, but it sounds like a great preaching convention. It's at Keswick. And he met this Irish preacher there. The Irish preacher's name was Derek Bingham. And he had this great work in Belfast. On Tuesdays, he would teach over 1,000 students, over 1,000 young people would come out and hear him preach. I can only imagine things like that. But that's awesome. His call to ministry could not be more different than mine. His mother was dying, and she said, I'm sure she had a bit of an Irish lilt to her voice, "Derek, my boy, you have the gift of gab, but you don't know the word." If you'd learned the word, the Lord might be able to use you. That was his call to ministry. I don't know that he ever considered preaching before. He didn't know the Bible. 3 weeks after his mother died, Derek Bingham was preaching. James Montgomery Boyce says that he was greatly impressed with the whole convention, as was Bingham, and that one evening the two of them were walking back to their quarters and they were talking about the whole thing. And that night, Bingham had spoken to around 4,000 or 5,000 people, so this was a big convention indeed. And here's what Bingham said. He said, as I was sitting there on the platform, I was thinking about my mother. And I was thinking that if my mother could come back from heaven for a moment and walk in here and see this great convention and me sitting there on the speaker's platform, I'd say to her, "Look what we're doing, Mom. Here we are. We're doing what you wanted us to do all the time." And he was really encouraged by that. But James Montgomery Boyce took it a little step further. If that was inspiration for him, if that's what kept him going, if that's what got him fired up, that's great. But how much more should we be inspired by this thought? That one day the Lord Jesus Christ himself will return. He's going to say to us, "How are you doing, my brothers? How are you doing, my sisters? Have you carried out your assignment?" Jesus will not be harsh, but he will be expecting that we've carried out the task. Back in the King James, it talks about occupy until I come. Jesus would say that to us. Follow through on the Great Commission to take this message of grace, the greatest message anyone could share, of grace, mercy, forgiveness, redemption forever. Take it to all creation. God bless you. As we begin a new year, may God help us to fulfill his purpose in our life. Happy New Year.